This scandal comes as no surprise.
And there's a very big difference. It was deliberate.
Like, why lie? It was just so truly, truly bizarre.
Silence everybody and just produce a DNA sample.
Meghan Markle's perfect fairy tale hides a missing year no one can explain. Her polished timeline says college prep, but sealed records whisper something else. The Duchess we know today was once a teenager tied to a Chicago secret.
Things just got a whole load worse for Meghan Markle because her sister Samantha ain't going anywhere.
I do believe because there are no delivery certificates.
A baby, a marriage, and a vanished year collide in one contradiction, and that gap is where the most dangerous truth may live. For decades, Meghan Markle's public story has been immaculate. Immaculate Heart, high school graduate in 1994, a self-reflective gap year, then Northwestern University in 1995, graduation, gap year, college, Hollywood, royalty, a timeline so clean it reads like a script. But reports tied to Chicago archives suggest that somewhere inside that missing year, the fairy tale collapses. Instead of a carefree young woman traveling abroad, whispers point to a hidden marriage in Las Vegas, an annulment filed under seal, and a child quietly absorbed into another family. This isn't gossip passed around by tabloids. Commentators point out that if the records didn't matter, why were they locked away? Why erase what should have been nothing more than a teenage misstep? That contradiction sets the tone for everything that follows.
So all of the pictures, my point is, out there were inconsistent with the idea of a real pregnancy.
A royal brand built on a story with holes no one wants to explain. And every hole, as fans online note, is large enough for truth to slip through. Insiders close to the Giuliano family, the name most often linked to this hidden chapter, describe them as private, traditional, and fiercely protective. Sources say their values clashed immediately with Meghan's ambitions for college, acting, and eventually fame. This was not just two teenagers experimenting with adulthood, it was the collision of two incompatible worlds. Fans on social media have compared it to Selena Gomez trying to settle into small-town domestic life. The math just doesn't work. Meghan wanted the spotlight. The Giulianos wanted silence. And that silence explains the annulment being sealed instead of dissolved like any other young marriage. Reports suggest this was no accident, but a deliberate effort to bury something much larger, an alleged pregnancy. By the summer of 1995, the whispers became harder to dismiss. Word is, a baby girl was born into the Giuliano household. But instead of announcements or adoption papers, everything was handled behind closed doors.
I grew up as an only child, which everyone who grew up around me knows. I would have loved to have had siblings, so I'm so excited to be pregnant so that Archie has someone.
That single year, 1994 to 1995, is now the black hole around which Meghan's story orbits. No study abroad paperwork, no photographs of overseas adventures, no school or travel records, nothing but silence. Commentators warn that silence in celebrity timelines is never neutral. It either hides scandal or manufactures myth. In Meghan's case, it may have done both. And if those sealed annulment files in Las Vegas ever surface, they could tie directly to the missing year Chicago whispers about. For fans already skeptical of Meghan's carefully polished public image, this gap year is no longer just a blank. It's a cliffhanger, one that sets the stage for revelations that could change how her entire rise to royalty is remembered. The silence around Meghan Markle's missing year didn't just puzzle historians. It ignited an entire online subculture determined to fill in the blanks. On Reddit threads dedicated to royal gossip, fans dissected her timeline with forensic precision. One viral post asked bluntly, "If Meghan really traveled abroad in 1994, where's the passport stamp?" Another pointed out how classmates from Immaculate Heart shared graduation trip photos, yet none ever included Meghan. These small inconsistencies fueled a storm of curiosity.
I think the palace and the machinery of the monarchy needs to take Harry and Meghan more seriously and make sure that Harry and Meghan's antics don't impact the future of the...
Commentators suggest that in the digital age, gaps in celebrity timelines function like magnets. They don't repel attention, they attract it. And in Meghan's case, the magnet was unusually strong. The question wasn't simply where she went, it became, what was she hiding? Fan speculation quickly collided with cultural memory. In Chicago, where the Giuliano family was known quietly within Italian-American circles, neighbors recalled seeing a little girl at family cookouts who didn't quite fit the story. According to one local interview archived by bloggers, she was introduced simply as family, never with a full explanation. To casual observers, this was ordinary, but in hindsight, it raised red flags. Fans online compared it to Britney Spears' secret annulment in Las Vegas back in 2004, a moment handled so swiftly that most people barely registered it until years later. The difference, critics argued, was that Britney's annulment was public record, while Meghan's remained sealed. Reports suggest that the secrecy is what kept the whispers alive. Instead of fading, they grew louder, attaching themselves to every gap in Meghan's narrative. By the late 2000s, when Meghan's fame expanded from Suits actress to Duchess of Sussex, the speculation took on a viral edge. TikTok edits juxtaposed photos of Meghan at Northwestern in 1995 against timelines of alleged Giuliano family gatherings in Chicago. One trending sound layered the words "gap year" over a ticking clock, symbolizing time running out on hidden truths. Fans claimed this wasn't conspiracy for conspiracy's sake, but a response to the contradictions Meghan herself created.
The fact is, Harry and Meghan lied. Buckingham Palace lied on their behalf. There was a complete cover-up.
Reports suggest that if she had left behind even a scrap of documentation, a student exchange program, a work visa, a simple travel photo, the narrative might have collapsed. But in its absence, the missing year became the canvas for an entire generation of speculation. Commentators warned that in the influencer era, silence doesn't protect you, it exposes you. And Meghan's silence was beginning to look less like privacy and more like deliberate concealment. The whispers about Meghan Markle's missing year always circled around one name: Joe Giuliano. He wasn't Hollywood, he wasn't chasing the spotlight. Sources describe him as grounded, family-focused, the kind of man who lived by old-world Italian-American values. According to reports tied to the family, those values collided violently with Meghan's ambitions. In their world, marriage came first, children were raised within the home, and problems were never broadcast to outsiders. Meghan, on the other hand, wanted freedom. College, acting, a life built for the public eye. Commentators suggest this cultural clash wasn't just inconvenient, it was combustible. Out of that collision came the most explosive claim that by mid-1995, Meghan was pregnant and a baby girl was quietly born in Chicago. Accounts connected to Giuliano relatives describe a family arrangement designed to erase Meghan's name from the story while protecting the child. Reports suggest the Giulianos raised the girl as one of their own, never filing adoption papers, never acknowledging her true parentage. Instead, neighbors remembered her presence at family barbecues, birthdays, and holiday gatherings, introduced only as family. One relative, quoted by a Chicago-based blogger, allegedly slipped in a candid moment. "She was Meghan's before she was ours." 7 words whispered in private that carried the weight of an entire scandal. Fans online compared this revelation to the way Janet Jackson's secret daughter was rumored for decades, half denied and half believed. The parallel wasn't accidental. Commentators speculated that, like Janet, Meghan's missing year could be hiding more than a blank timeline. It could be concealing a living reminder of choices she could never admit. The annulment documents only add fuel to the fire. While teenage marriages that fail are often dissolved in ordinary court filings, Meghan's annulment was sealed, an unusual step for what should have been a routine case. Reports suggest the sealing was not to protect minors, but to shield details too disruptive to her future. Critics in the media point out that this sealing lines up suspiciously well with the alleged timeline of the child's birth. If there was nothing to hide, why lock the paperwork away? And why has no trace of that annulment surfaced in the decades since? For fans dissecting Meghan's carefully curated public image, this wasn't just a red flag, it was the smoking gun, and it left one unavoidable question hanging in the air. If the Giulianos raised a child and Meghan walked away to reinvent herself at Northwestern, what happens if that child one day steps forward? As Meghan Markle transitioned from actress to Duchess of Sussex, the whispers she left behind in Chicago didn't vanish. They evolved. Commentators recall how the British press combed through her past relentlessly, searching for cracks in the fairy tale. Yet the one-year gap between high school and Northwestern remained untouched, a blank page no one dared print. Fans online argued that this wasn't oversight, it was orchestration. One viral TikTok claimed, "The silence around Meghan's gap year is louder than any scandal she's ever denied." And as her marriage to Prince Harry transformed her into global royalty, the risk of those whispers reaching daylight became infinitely more dangerous. Reports suggest palace aides worked overtime to defend her image, vetting biographies and press profiles with forensic control. Still, silence has its limits. And in the digital age, limits always break. The cultural reaction to even the possibility of a hidden child would be seismic. Fans online already debate whether Meghan's carefully curated public persona can survive another credibility crisis. Comparisons to past royal scandals are everywhere, from Princess Diana's taped confessions to Prince Andrew's catastrophic interview. But commentators warn this would be different. This wouldn't just be about optics or bad choices. It would call into question Meghan's honesty about her own identity. If a Chicago daughter exists, raised outside her public story, the narrative of the outsider who conquered tradition collapses instantly. Media critics point out the irony. Meghan built her global brand on transparency, vulnerability, and telling her truth. To discover a hidden chapter this significant would invert that message into hypocrisy. Fans on X, formerly Twitter, joked grimly, "Oprah asked, 'Were you silent or silenced?' Turns out Meghan was both." Institutional consequences loom larger still. Reports suggest studios considering Meghan and Harry's joint production deals have already grown cautious after previous projects underperformed. A scandal of this magnitude could give corporate boards cold feet. Commentators speculate that streaming platforms, already sensitive to reputational risk after high-profile cancellations, might shelve projects quietly rather than gamble on controversy. Meanwhile, cultural analysts warn of the broader financial fallout. The Sussex brand, once valued in the hundreds of millions through deals with Netflix, Spotify, and Penguin Random House, could face irreversible damage. If Meghan's credibility cracks, the very foundation of brand Sussex collapses, and insiders suggest it would not stop there. Questions could ricochet back toward the palace itself. What did they know, and when did they know it? That chain reaction, from Chicago whispers to Buckingham Palace corridors, is why critics call this not just a scandal in waiting, but a time bomb. The question haunting every corner of this story is simple. What happens if silence breaks? Imagine the cultural earthquake if a woman in her late 20s suddenly stepped forward, claiming not just a bloodline, but a birthright. Commentators suggest it would overshadow every royal interview, every palace statement, every Hollywood project Meghan has ever touched. Fans speculate about the headlines. Hidden heir in Chicago? Meghan's missing year revealed. And in an age where one TikTok can launch a global movement overnight, it wouldn't take much more than a single photograph, a single document, or a single public word from that alleged daughter to ignite a storm. Reports say even the possibility has insiders nervous. Because if true, this wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be a collapse of narrative, an unraveling 3 decades in the making. The fan reaction would explode instantly. Memes would flood TikTok. Hashtags like hashtag Meghan's missing year and hashtag Chicago daughter would trend by the hour. Commentators on YouTube would dig through every interview, every biography, looking for signs of contradiction. Some fans would defend Meghan fiercely, calling the whispers intrusive and cruel. Others would demand accountability, framing it as betrayal on par with the royal scandals of past centuries. Analysts argue the split could become generational. Older audiences seeing it as moral failure, younger ones framing it as survival strategy. But either way, the cultural conversation would be unavoidable. Meghan would no longer control the narrative. She would be reacting to it, caught in a cycle of denial, explanation, and deflection. Each statement fueling further speculation. The institutions around her would not escape untouched. Media watchdogs warn that studios and publishers already burned by declining Sussex projects could quietly cut ties. Royal commentators argue Buckingham Palace would face its own reckoning, whether to acknowledge, deny, or remain silent. And culturally, the scandal would ripple outward, reshaping how celebrity brands are built. Commentators remind us that secrets in Hollywood and royalty rarely stay buried. From Marilyn Monroe's concealed adoption rumors to Janet Jackson's whispered daughter, the past always finds a way back. Meghan's story, if fractured by this revelation, would become the cautionary tale of an era obsessed with curated transparency. And for fans who once believed in the fairy tale, the fallout would sting most of all. Because it wouldn't just be about a hidden child, it would be about whether Meghan Markle's story was ever truly hers to begin with. If a sealed file in Las Vegas and whispers in Chicago can haunt a Duchess, imagine what happens if those whispers turn into proof. Will Meghan's missing year remain a mystery, or will it rewrite royal history? Subscribe now, hit like, and stay tuned, because the silence is already starting to crack, and you'll want to be here when it finally breaks.